Welcome to our program this morning. Thank you for attending and thanks for all of our speakers for being here.
All right, so Mary, if you want to put up that first poll while I get started here, let them respond to the poll. So my name is Dennis Pennington. I'm a wheat extension specialist with Michigan State University. And part of my responsibilities include the wheat variety trials that we conduct in Michigan. We plant, or my team plants all of the variety or the breeding trials as well as that. And we do a bunch of agronomy research on wheat as well. While wheat is kind of the focus of what I do, we do plant some other small grains. We plant some triticale and rye and oats and barley as well. But really the wheat is the primary thing that we're focused on. So in the poll, I can see you're all answering questions here. I was interested in why you might be interested in growing soft white winter wheat, because all of you grow soft red winter wheat. And so it looks like the results are coming in. I got 15 out of 30 people have responded. If you want to respond, go ahead. If not, Mary, when you're ready, go ahead and end the poll and share the results. So this is kind of what I was expecting to see. The interest is really focused around the higher price. And so I'll talk to you a little bit about that. And there's also some thought that higher yield potential, maybe it's a little bit easier to grow. And then there's some of you that are not interested in growing soft white winter wheat, which is totally fine. So if you want to stop sharing those results, I'll go ahead and get into the presentation. So first thing I wanted to do is just kind of go over what is the difference between soft red and soft white winter wheat. From a milling perspective and an end use perspective, what soft red winter wheat is used for is different. They're used for things like breads and crackers and cookies and those kind of things. Soft white wheat is a little bit different in that it is used for some of these, they're calling them exquisite cakes and pastries and Asian noodles. So the markets are a little bit different for soft white compared to soft red. And you just need to know that up front. So that the things that the end user or the miller that's looking to buy the wheat is looking for in the characteristics and traits are a little bit different between the two classes of wheat. So the other thing that might be good for us to do is just review a little bit of what are the different classes of wheat and where are those classes of wheat grown and what are they used for. This information comes from the U.S. Wheat Associates. In fact, I'd like to take you to their website here. There's 6 different classes of wheat, and by each color you can see where in the United States each of these different classes of wheat are grown. But if we go to the website here, what it will do is we can actually interact with a map. So are you seeing my map on the screen now?
Yes, we are.
Perfect. Thanks for confirming. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off some of these ones that we don't grow in Michigan. Like the hard red winter wheat is the green. When I shut that off, you're going to see that takes out the plains as far as where they produce things. The hard white wheat, there's not a lot of hard white wheat grown. And the hard red spring, you're going to see disappear up in the north in the Dakotas. And then the Durham wheat is this kind of, burgundy color here. That's used for making pasta. So I've left the soft white and the soft red on. The majority of the soft white wheat is grown out in the Pacific Northwest, was a little bit down here in Idaho and in extreme northern Utah. So what about closer to home where we are here? What do we grow here? In the eastern United States, it's almost entirely soft red winter wheat. And so if you're looking at Ohio and Indiana and Michigan, it doesn't look like there's any soft white, does it? It looks like it's all soft red. So let me turn off the soft red, and what you're going to see is there's not much of a market out there right now. These are the elevators, and they're concentrated in the thumb of Michigan that actually take soft white wheat. So just keep this in mind because, and I think if you look elsewhere in Ohio or anywhere else, you're not going to find any more of these blue dots. So if you want to get into the soft white wheat market, you're going to have to ship your grain up here into the thumb in order to have a market for that. So just wanted to give you a little bit of background on some of the different classes of wheat and where it's grown. So let's get at some of the questions that you had there. What about the yield? We test white wheat varieties as well as red wheat varieties in our wheat performance trials here at Michigan State University. What I have listed on the left here in this table is taken from our 2020 report. And these are the top 10 white wheat varieties that are entered. The ones that are highlighted in red are experimental. So one of the things that's great for us is we get to test not only commercially available lines, which is about 60 of those. We also have about 40 or 45 experimental lines from about 13 different companies, as well as our own. These MI lines are Michigan lines that are developed here by our wheat breeder, Eric Olson. So the average of all of these is about 102 for the top 10. So what does the red wheats look like? These are the top 10 red wheats. Well, pretty similar in yield, 109, 109, 106, 106. As in fact, even as you get down here to the bottom of the top 10, this is a little bit tighter range with a mean of a 105 compared to 103. So we can grow equally as good a yield in red wheat as what we are white wheat. People think that white wheat have a higher yield potential, but that has to do with the location that it's grown. So let me cover that just a little bit here. Now, I wanted to show you some data from, we have a research location in Lenawee County, which is the one that's closest to Ohio. So in the last 2 years, we have had at our location down there severe water ponding to the point where we have decided not to publish results from these yield trials just because they decimated our plots. We had maybe 30% of our plots still viable at the end. So I've got to go back here to 2018 for data. So just know that this data is 3 years old now. But so in 2018, the overall average, and this is overall across all 7 locations that we have. Okay, so this is the kind of statewide average for the top 10 white wheats in Michigan. And the average in that year overall was 84 across all the locations. So let's look at just Allegan County over here on the west side of the state. This is kind of some sandier ground. Look at the yields here compared to the overall average, quite a lot lower. White wheat doesn't grow very well over on that side of the state. Look at Lenawee County down here closer to you. Average yield was 88, above the mean. So some pretty decent yields there in 2018, but then look what happens when I add Sanilac County in here. You get up there into the thumb area, this county up here where we have our trial. That's 10 bushels above Lenawee County in terms of yield potential. So the reason that most people think that white wheat yields better than red wheat is because we're growing most of our white wheat up here in this thumb region. If you remember the map where those blue dots were at that I showed you, that's where the market exists for white wheat. And this area up here is our best growing wheat ground in Michigan. So, but like I showed you on the previous slide, when I plant red wheat at these locations up here, I can get the same yield out of them as what I can the white wheat. So for white wheat, location matters, and the yield potential for red and for white are actually quite similar if you're planting them side by side. So let's talk a little bit about the agronomy program, because the way that we grow white wheat is just a little bit different. And it takes a little bit of ingenuity, kind of like this guy on Twitter sent me this picture. He fixed this chain to keep his planter going. He said he was able to, this got him through the day until he was able to get the chain fixed. So maybe that's a bad joke, I don't know. But anyway, so it doesn't take that much ingenuity to grow white wheat. But anyway, let's get started. So variety selection is the first thing. Yield potential, as with even red wheat as well, yield potential is the #1 thing you need to be looking at. You want high yield potential. But a real close second with white wheat in particular is Fusarium head blight resistance. White wheat has much lower tolerance for vomitoxin in the grain at harvest time. So we've got to have some resistance in the variety that we select when we plant. And then certainly any other leaf disease resistance that you can get in a variety is certainly something you want to think about when you're considering what varieties to plant. And there are a number of varieties. I think we've got around 20 commercially available varieties of white wheat that we plant in Michigan. Nitrogen is a little bit different. We put on our red wheats, we put 90 pounds of nitrogen on at green up, and then we don't do a second application for the most part. There are a few guys across the state that are trying to push wheat yields that are putting a second application on, but for the most part, red wheat is a thing where they get out there and they put one application of nitrogen on and they're done. With the white wheat, almost every white wheat grower is doing at least 2 applications of nitrogen. Some of them are even doing 3. But on the white wheat, we're putting an additional 30 pounds of nitrogen on just prior to stem elongation, which starts at feet 6 in terms of crop development. Sulfur is another thing that most of our white wheat growers are putting on. They're putting on 15 to 20 pounds per acre. That can be done in the fall or spring. Some would argue that sulfur can be mobile in the soil, but so far we've seen equal response between fall and spring. Some work that Dr. Kurt Steinke has done, our soil fertility specialist here at MSU. But they are putting this sulfur on, and they're seeing a yield gain out of it. And probably 3 out of 5 years, they're seeing a yield benefit from it. The last thing, and probably one of the most expensive parts of this, is the fungicide. And they're putting 2 applications of fungicide on white wheat. They're putting 1 on at flag leaf, and they're putting 1 on at flowering time. The flag leaf is just to control for leaf diseases, and that goes on usually around the 15th of May. That's usually about when we are hitting flag leaf in Michigan. And so that's kind of in prime corn and soybean planting season. And then the second application, which is the most important, the flowering, to control fusarium head blight. And it does help control leaf diseases, but the key thing is this fusarium head blight. That usually occurs around Memorial Day. And so we can still be planting some soybeans in Michigan on Memorial Day. So for guys that, wheat is a secondary crop, it's not their primary thing, and they don't want to have to stop planting corn or soybeans to get out and put a fungicide on, the timing is very important. So you got to take that into consideration. And then grain quality is of paramount in white wheat, much more so than what it is with red wheat. And I'll talk a little bit about some of the grain quality considerations here in a minute. So in terms of management costs, red versus white, let's talk just a little bit about that, and I'll try to put some numbers to it here. Red wheat, I mentioned that we generally put about 90 pounds of nitrogen on per acre. And a lot of guys, not everybody is putting on 1 fungicide application, but they're not doing the 2. So the difference between our red and the white is this extra nitrogen that we're putting on and a second fungicide application, or in some cases, for some people, a first fungicide application. So what I would propose is to make a comparison between the costs, is that we figure the cost of the additional nitrogen and a fungicide pass in terms of difference between a red and a white. So the 30 units of N, I used a price of 42 cents per nitrogen. If that number is a little bit different for your farm, you can adjust that accordingly. I added a $5 application cost per acre. That gives you $17.60 an acre for the nitrogen. In our plots, we put Prosaro on last year, and it cost us $18.10 per acre for the product. And that's with non-ionic surfactant added in there as well. So it's Prosaro plus NIS. And then I put a $7 application cost in here. You add those 2 together and you got $25.10 per acre. The total cost for the nitrogen and the fungicide application is up north of $40 an acre. So if you're going to have additional costs to grow the white wheat, you got to have enough extra income. So some of you said that higher price is a reason to grow it. Well, yes, there is a higher price for white wheat. The question is it enough to pay for your costs? So let's talk about the price and some of these benefits and risks associated with the white wheat. The premium for white wheat ranges usually between 0 and 75 cents per bushel. I've seen that number go as high as $1.25 in 1 year. That happened only one time. But this number is really based on the number of acres of white wheat harvested, the quality of that grain coming into these elevators, and then how much of the previous crop is still in storage at these grain elevators. And so they fluctuate that amount based on how much grain, how much white wheat they want coming in or not coming in. So let's just look at an example. On January 6th, this is when I put this together, and there's been a market in the rally, so the market in the rally is not reflected in these prices. But on January 6th, the July harvest, so harvest delivery of white wheat, and this is at one of the local elevators up in the Thumb, was priced at $6.12. The red wheat for the same delivery was priced at $5.72. That's a difference of 40 cents a bushel. Okay. So if you take that 40 cents a bushel and figure out, is that enough to pay for my extra costs for the fungicide and the nitrogen? Remember, we said it was $42.70 from the previous slide. Depending on your wheat yield will depend on what your break even is. If you're a 70 bushel grower, you have a break even of 61 cents. It doesn't pay right now to go to white wheat. That premium's got to get up closer to 75 cents for it to pay if you're a 70 bushel grower. If you're a 90 bushel grower, that break even is 47 cents, which is still a little above what the current benefit is. So you got to get up there, in that 110 bushel, then your break even is 39 cents. Now you're in the money for growing white wheat. Now, this does not factor in trucking costs. You will have additional trucking costs to get it delivered to a point of market. So you'll have to factor that in there as well. And then the other thing that this may start to sound a little bit negative, but I want to be realistic with you too. There are some grain quality discounts that we have for white wheat that can stack up in a hurry. And if you don't have good quality, if you didn't do a good job managing your fungicide, and you get some diseases, or we have some late season high humidity and rain at harvest time, you can get some serious dockage in all this benefit up here can go away pretty quickly. So what are some of the grain quality risks? There's kind of three key things that white wheat growers get docked for. Vomitoxin caused by Fusarium head blight. You're familiar with that one. That's same for red wheat as it is for white wheat. Actually, all of these, you can get docked for these in red and white, but there tends to be a higher dock for white wheat in each of these, and lower thresholds for acceptance in terms of getting loads rejected. So falling number, I don't know if you're familiar with what falling number is. I'll try to just give you a quick overview of what falling number is. What it is when you bring a load to the elevator, they will pull their grain sample. And one of the things they do is they grind it up and they make this kind of slurry. And what they're testing is the quality of the starch in the kernel. And what they want is high quality starch that has not started to be broken down by alpha amylase. Now, if alpha amylase has started to break down, which happens when you have sprout, if alpha amylase is starting to break down that starch, what you get is a very thin consistency in this liquid. And so the falling number it's actually the number of seconds that it takes for a bobber that they put in this slurry to fall from the top to the bottom of that slurry. So you want a high falling number. You want it to take a long time. You want something that's very viscous, a very thick kind of starch consistency. Then you get higher quality bread compared to if you have very low falling number where that bobber falls through very quickly. It only takes 62 seconds to fall from top to bottom. Look what happens when you try to make a loaf of bread out of it. So a lot of them are at this 250 or higher. You got to have 250 or higher. You get below that, and then the quality of the grain is low, and they don't want the grain. So they start discounting it for the farther lower the falling number gets. And then visual sprouting symptoms are something additional that you can get docked for. And that is really caused by rainy, humid weather at harvest time. And the white wheats tend to be more susceptible to this sprout than what the red wheats are. Now, this falling number, I mentioned alpha amylase because alpha amylase activity can be caused by sprout, but it can be also caused by cold temperatures about 20 days prior to harvest. So if you get some cool nights 20 days prior to harvest, when you've reached dry down and you're ready, that can trigger alpha amylase activity, and you may not even see a sprout, but you're going to see your falling numbers decrease. So that's something else that you have to consider. So what about the grain quality discounts for these things? There's the three of them. I've got falling numbers, the sprout, and then the Don discounts over here. Falling numbers, some of them start at 275, some of them start at 250. Some of them start at 225. The red wheats tend to start at a lower number, maybe 225. But in the Thumb where they're growing white wheat, 275 is a pretty common number to start at. in these discounts vary from elevator to elevator and from year to year. This is just an example that I pulled from a year ago. It's 3 cents per point. So if you're at 275 and up, you got 0 discount. For every point you are lower, it's another 3 cents, and that adds up. Sprout, they can tolerate a little bit of Sprout in there, up to 2%. That's only a 10-cent discount, but you get above between 2 and 3. It jumps to 50-cent discount per bushel. 3 to 4 is $1, and so on. So you can, if you have sprouting, you can lose some income potential very quickly. And then you all are probably familiar with DON or vomitoxin discounts. This is just an example here, 2 to 3 at a 30-cent discount, between 3 and 4, 50-cent discount. But the thing on the bottom here that's pretty important, anything over 2 parts per million is subject to rejection. And the reason is because these white wheat flour mills are required, in fact, the red and white are required to have less than 2 parts per million in their flour of vomitoxin. So it depends on the quality of the other grain coming in. If they have some good quality grain with very low DON coming in, that they can commingle it, and they feel comfortable that they can do that and get it mixed so the resulting flour is less than the 2, they may go ahead and take it even if yours happens to have higher DON numbers. But you know, then again, it just depends on everybody else, and you can't bank on that, you know, when you're planning your crop, as far as what you're going to plant. So just know that these risks exist out there. And if you manage your crop right, you pick good varieties, you give it the adequate fertility, you can get good yields. You manage the fungicides, you can control your diseases, and you can get some, you know, pretty good yields. And there is some benefit from going white wheat. That's why they're doing it in the thumb of Michigan. So just to kind of summarize here, in terms of white wheat, there is limited market access. We've talked about that. There is a higher cost of production. We did talk about that. And then there is greater risk associated with maintaining high grain quality that the white wheat millers need in that product. So it's, you know, up to you to decide. I'm happy to provide additional information to anybody that wants it, that's thinking about trying to grow some white wheat. But I guess with that, does anybody have any questions about white wheat? I got one more thing I'd like to visit with you about, if I've got time, but are there any questions right now?
I don't see any questions in the Q&A, but oh, there is a question in the chat. Is the average red wheat market a secondary market or rejected white wheat?
Is a red wheat market a secondary? No, the red wheat market is still, the red wheat is still milled and made into flour that's used to make, you know, cookies and crackers and breads and things like that. So it's not really a secondary. In the red wheat market would not be, if white wheat gets rejected, it'll probably be rejected at a red wheat mill as well. They don't like to commingle red and white wheat. In fact, there's some places actually have on their discount schedule, if it's contaminated with red wheat or it's white wheat contaminated with red, vice versa, they'll dock you for that. They want them kept separate.
Can you share who the white wheat end users are in the Great Lakes region and Michigan, or Michigan?
So end users, is this like who the farmers would deliver to, who the millers are, or
who is contracting the wheat?
Yeah, so it's primarily the mills, and I'd have to get a list of them. There is King Milling, Lowell Milling, Star of the West. I'm forgetting a couple. There's a few of them that take white wheat. Star of the West is probably the biggest one that takes white wheat, but we do have a number of mills that do.
Thank you. If anybody else has questions for Dennis, you can ask him. And Dennis, if you have something else that you wanted to share, we do have a couple minutes.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I do have something else. And this is for the wheat growers that we have in the audience here. One of the things that I've been working on is this concept called a yield enhancement network. And this started out of somebody that I met from United Kingdom, where they actually have created what they're calling a cereal yen. And this ADAS company, they're a private consultant, commodity or grain consultant for, and they're an agronomist, and they've got crop physiologists and whatnot working for them. And what I wanted to do is share with you a little bit about what this Great Lakes Yield Enhancement Network that we're looking to create is, because this year we're trying to create it this year, and next year we're hoping to invite Ohio and New York growers to participate with us. So what this Yield Enhancement Network is it centers around a yield contest. So and it would be similar to like the National Wheat Yield Contest or the soybean contest or corn. But it centers around a yield contest. So participants would enter a field into it. There's a considerable amount of data collection that we collect, and then we report that back to each of the participants. And I'll show you some examples of what some of that data looks like here in just a second. But the last part of this or component of this is a networking event that allows us to get together and discuss how do we increase yield and profit on farms. And this is farmers talking to farmers, agribusiness talking to farmers, farmers talking to agribusiness, plant breeders, and everybody that we can get to come to the table to talk about how do we increase yield for our crop. And it kind of, one of the key tenets of this is looking at what is the theoretical maximum yield potential that we have in the fields that we are growing. And it looks at the amount of solar radiation, how much light energy is there in that field, what is the water availability in the field, and then we use how much of that can we capture, and then how well are the plants that we have in our field able to convert that to biomass and yield. So some of the data collection that we will be doing with this project includes soil data that we'll get from the Sergo soil maps. We'll pull soil samples, leaf tissue samples. We'll measure light energy capture, some yield component data, and then, of course, the harvested area and weight to get our yields, and then all the agronomy details of how did we grow a crop from, planting dates, seeding rates, nitrogen rates, fungicide applications, plant growth regulators, everything that's done. And we bring weather into it, and we generate a report that has some of this kind of information in it here. And this is an actual report for somebody from the United Kingdom, where this particular person achieved 10.7 tons per hectare, which is 144 bushels per acre. According to the yield potential, they achieved 51% of their yield potential, which is 20.9 tons per hectare for that specific field in that specific year. That would have been the maximum potential, which is like 300 bushels per acre. They produced 18.5 tons per hectare of biomass. And this year they had 305 millimeters of soil available water, plus another 189 millimeters of rainwater for a total available to the plant of 494. It gives you some of the agronomy information behind it. There's a clay loam soil, tillage based, planted after grass. They get poultry manure one in every 3 to 5 years. It was planted October 10th at this seeding rate, which is 1.2 million seeds per acre. They put on 3 applications of nitrogen totaling 206 pounds per acre, 2 plant growth regulators, 3 fungicides. Notice their 3 fungicides only cost $45 an acre. That would be remarkable if we had fungicides that were that cheap. But they get information like how much light energy did they capture on their farm, and they have this box and whisker plot that shows them. The box is where 50% of the people in the contest did. The yellow line here is what their actual number was, and then the maximum of anybody in the contest and the minimum on this end. So here's soil water captured. This is the grains per meter squared, number of ears per meter squared, the 1,000 grain weight. So you get a ton of information in this project reported back to each participant. So I'd like to just make you aware of this. We have the Great Lakes Wheat Workers Group that meets every year. Currently, out of that group, Michigan and Ontario are part of this. We're working with ADAS out of the United Kingdom. We're in the process of developing the framework and the database and then the reporting. But I'm hoping that next year we can invite Ohio and New York to participate in this. And so just be on the lookout for more details on this. And I just kind of wanted to make you aware of it. So with that, Mary, I think I'm wrapped up. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to share. If anybody wants my contact information, it's there. Feel free to contact me, and we'll go from there.
Thank you, Dennis.